Hello, everyone. I'm Matt Randall with Commercial Bank of America. Just want to give a shout out to Rod. Thank him for having Bank of America as a sponsor, facilitator. What a great group. And then, again, this is our third conference, and they just continue to get better and better. So thank you, Rod, Lisa,
the colors of the sky
team.
the setting sun.
Well, today I'm going to dig a little deeper on cybersecurity, and we have two special guests. First guest is Rene Miller, who serves as the Chief Executive Officer of InterSystems LLC, an IT managed services and cybersecurity firm based in Covington, Louisiana. He co-founded InterSystems in 1997 and has led the company for over 25 years. Under his leadership, the firm has helped hundreds of small businesses in the greater New Orleans and North Shore regions grow more efficiently by leveraging technology and minimizing unplanned downtime. As CEO, Miller oversees the delivery of services such as network management, cloud and VoIP solutions, and cybersecurity consulting, ensuring that IT strategy is aligned with each client's business objectives. Our second speaker today on cybersecurity is Paul Haley. He is the Chief Financial Officer at Chilco. He is a CPA and has extensive experience in public accounting, benefits administration, information technology, and management. He has worked through many re-leveraging and refinancing transactions as the CFO of Chilco and has been part of the company's transition to 100% ESOP S-Corp status. He has spoken at local and regional conferences on topics including sustainability, communication, and repurchase obligations. And with that, I'll let our special guest come up and talk some cybersecurity.
All right, everybody. Can you hear me? Sounds good.
I hear
All right. Awesome. Well, yeah.
Before we get started, just hey, let y'all know. Guess whose birthday is today? Happy birthday, Paul.
Anyway, we try not to celebrate those anymore when you get to my age. But I worked with Rene for, better part of 2 decades. When I first got into it, I kind of got into IT probably like a lot of you guys in accounting roles got into IT. I went to my first firm right out of college, and they were like, hey, we're looking to go on paperless, and we're doing it all in old school ledger paper, and with that said, you're young, you must know computers, and I was like, okay. So quickly then I was helping them with Pro System FX, which was new at the time, and got them all going paperless, and then it was Microsoft networking, and they had a Cisco phone system, so then I had to become a CCNA, and they're like, oh, we have this old Linux and Unix box, do you know that? And I was like, let's go, we'll give it a whirl. And from there, I was working with Rene more in a break fix standpoint. Eventually, it got so big that I couldn't manage the entire resources, and I wound up at a larger company. Rene came on and kind of did full service for us, and in typical, I'm still an accountant at heart, so we worked together for about maybe 6 or 7 years, and then I said, man, you're too expensive, and I had to move on to a different group. And then realized pretty quickly that there's nobody who's more at the cutting edge of kind of what's going on from a cybersecurity standpoint, and just kind of knowing the trends of where it's going than Rene. And ultimately, we went back and decided, hey, look, it's worth the extra money. So, yeah, I guess, does that kind of surmise our working relationship thus far?
Thank you, Paul. That's awesome. Thank you for that. So today we're going to talk about what we see, Paul and I see, coming forward, cybersecurity risk for the next 6-12 months. And Paul's here primarily to translate what I have to say, because too often I get down in the weeds. You're not supposed to shake your head yes. So with that, let's get diving. We got a lot to cover.
Well, awesome. If you look at the trends of what's going on, and it was an awesome tee-up because the whole morning practically was about AI, right? So increased use of AI, but if you don't put the appropriate constraints around it or box around it, you can really get yourself in trouble. We didn't talk a lot about quantum computing, but that's coming, and that's something we'll delve a lot into. Kind of ways to protect, like zero trust architecture. How many of you guys have like a zero trust software that you're currently utilizing in your organization? Anybody? Got a handful, or a hand, let's say maybe 2 to 3%. We'll talk about what that does and why it's important. And just advances in AI and social engineering. What's funny is, he was just talking in the last session about how they use, voices or essentially automated telephone calls. And you can think about how you can really, beyond just bot accounts on social media websites, if it's your actual voice, there's significant constraints. They only need, how many minutes of voice?
You need about 2, last model I saw that you could do it inside of a minute of voice.
So if somebody, cold calls you, you answer and you're just going hello, 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 and you say a few things, well, quickly, they can turn around and use your voice to call into your APAR department or, quickly deepfake you.
See, we're going to dive more into that, into some real world examples that we've seen in that. So, like the national debt, ransomware, bad actors, it's not going down anytime soon. Robert Mueller, former head of the FBI, there's only 2 kinds of people, those who've been compromised and those who haven't, right? And those who are about to be. So you can see that what that chart's trying to show you is the top line is the number of ransomware events, victims for this year. And then of course it flat lines because we don't have the rest of the year yet. But that's up through May and the previous 2 years. And there's no month on there where it's less than, you could probably, in some of the months, take the previous 2 years, add them together, and get to 2025. So this is not a problem that's going away. It's only getting worse. And all of us have to keep pivoting. It's not, if one of your takeaways that you should take for today is that cybersecurity is not a destination. It's not like Fort Walton Beach where you get there and, hey, look, I've arrived. Cybersecurity is always a moving target, unfortunately, and it's going to keep evolving. So even if you're great today, you won't be 6 months or a year from now.
Well, and the second bullet point there too, that really we focus on is, if you look at the #1 target of who people are going after, it's this room, right? Everybody in this room, you are like the #1 target. You control the money for your organization typically. A lot of times you're the approver. So as such, I guarantee that there's probably somebody in China that has your name on a list and they're actively working to try and get to you. Or name other nefarious country. So.
And later we're going to show a little bit of we needed a victim to try today, and so we randomly, out of all the names here, we picked somebody who's here, and just to show what we can quickly find about a person. Thank you for the volunteer.
Well, awesome. Well, if we move to the next, one of the others, in fact, Rene kind of queued it up, and if you want to go to it, what we did was, I felt like it would have been bad if we just grabbed somebody at random, and, he lives close enough that he can burn my house down. So we grabbed Rod as an example, and we went out to ChatGPT. Now, if one of your, if your salesmen are not using this as a tool, then you're missing out. Because, if your salesmen, their big job is they need to get out and they need to strike up a conversation with somebody that they don't know.
As they said with the banks, the biggest thing was what it's about relationships, right? So you have to engage the person where they are and emotionally connect to them. And if you're cold calling somebody, you don't really know what their points are. You don't know what really drives them, what makes them as a person. And keep going.
And if you go out to ChatGPT and you say, okay, you may want to put a caveat on it as opposed to like, tell me everything you can tell me about Rod and his family and his kids. But if you say, hey, look, I have a meeting with Rod and I want to know everything that I can find out personally and professionally about him, do a deep seek and tell me what you can find out. Well, we say a lot about social media and whatnot, like, obviously if you don't have your social media locked down, it might scan mine and say, hey, the guy's in 3 bourbon clubs, he might have a problem. It could go pretty deep and it could return a lot of information, but it might also say, hey, the guy's an LSU fan, the guy posts a decent amount about the Saints. Maybe you would want to strike up a conversation with him about the Saints.
And not hockey.
Right, exactly. So if you want to pull up, because we ran it earlier, we just kicked it off. It takes maybe about 10 minutes to run, but you can see that it'll return some pretty, pretty decent information pretty quickly, right?
So what we did is we just started off the
I
prompt
don't
here.
even know that it's showing. We're still on the PowerPoint there.
Well, I'm not
Yeah, it's right there, that screen there. So, so think about this. Now, granted, with the AIs, they try to do it ethically, right? So there aren't ones that are going out and literally scraping public IP posts. I mean, at least ChatGPT and Grok and the big ones won't. But there are, Facebook scrapers. There are 100 of them out there. I went quickly and I could find out all kinds of information about people quickly. So I said, okay, I'm going to see Rod Nunez of Hub International and USFEG. Tell me everything you can personally and professionally about him so I can talk to him and better connect with him.
And remember, one of the things that, there was a lot of focus, and most of y'all are using, how many of you here use 4 different AIs? Okay, I see 2 hands. All right, keep your hand up, or put your hand up if you use 3. Okay, and 2. And okay, so at least 2, and then 1 is everybody. So where I'm trying to get to is that what I'm finding very effective is that you use one AI to build your prompt. Because earlier we talked about, hey, look, one of the skills that we need to learn is you have to learn about prompt generation and how to, because it's about how you ask the question. So very often I do, to make my life easier, is I go to one AI to say, hey, look, I need to phrase the prompt question to ChatGPT. And so I may go ask Claude, how do you do this? Claude will give me a good question, and then I can feed it and maybe get a better question to add, so that comes a better answer out of the AI.
So you can scroll a little
And
bit.
so it came back, we asked that question, and immediately it prompts 3. And so remember, this is a feature that's only available in the paid version. Okay, it's not available. Deep research is not yet available on the free.
But it is free in Grok, so if you don't want to pay for it, you can go out and do Grok, right? So it finds some stuff pretty quickly. It's got USI before, it's got his Aflac history. When we were playing with it before, I got it to return Lisa's name, both his boys' names. Again,
she's dying right now, I'm sure. I love it.
It'll tell you about where he went to school. It'll tell you his high school. I mean,
and this, by the way, is the first time we're looking at this today. Yes, we did do it earlier, but we launched it before, during the middle of lunch, and we said, hey, we're going to just see what happens. So
does it say I like walking long walks on the beach with my imaginary friend?
What does it put up there? Well, Rod, you tell us how much of that is accurate or inaccurate.
Yes.
How much is inaccurate?
That's
right. So think about it. If somebody, again, we're the biggest targets. If somebody's trying to phish you, and they get all of this information about you.
Is the Mary Birds thing, for example, accurate? Right?
Well, I'm no longer, but I was, yeah.
Okay, so let's say that was still accurate. That's a great social connection. Then when we're making an emotional connection with somebody in a sales event, or bad guy doing it, as Paul's talking about, this is a great way to emotionally connect with the person to make their walls. Because going back to zero trust, we'll fast forward a little bit to come back to now. But the idea of zero trust is most of us operate from a threshold of the following. Our default is we'll have a conversation with each other until we have a reason not to. So that's a default allow. Instead of the inverse of that, which is default deny, which means that I don't talk to somebody unless I have, one, a reason to, or, because we would call that, hey, that's unsocial behavior, you don't do that, right? That's just bad, you don't do that. But you don't talk to them until you have a reason or that some third party has trusted this guy's okay. So this is where bad actors, AI, very much makes it easier to go take this stuff and build off of it, build a relationship. So the Jefferson Parish workforce.
All right, so quick show of hands, whose sales team could use this?
And
who does this terrify? Right? A little bit of both, right?
And Rod, is that a great biography of you?
Yeah, I mean,
You should do that, maybe use that?
I could never have done it. That's perfect. Send it to me, please.
Yeah. So it finds
Scary,
that
but
stuff
cool.
quick.
Yeah, that's all good.
Toggling back over.
Mr. AV, Mr. AV.
I am Mr. AV. Does it say that?
So toggling back over to the PowerPoint, what we aim to do here is kind of spell out. We're going to go through some of the more recent big hacks. We'll go through and spell out how they happened, what happened, and then later at the end we'll come back and say, okay, these are some of the controls that you should have in place or things that you should do to to stop it. So The first story I'll tell is a very, mild level hack that is something that is not on a big company engineering wise. But how many of you guys use facial recognition on your iPhone? Feel pretty good about it, right? Well,
Pretty secure, right?
exactly. Well, this happened to an employee's husband. He was up in New York. He was hanging out with a buddy. And they went to a bar and they were hanging out there for maybe 30 minutes before the bartender came over and said, hey, you got to get the hell out of here. And he was like, what's going on? And he said, that girl at the end of the bar, she said that you inappropriately touched her. You guys need to get out of here. And he's like, I've never even seen that girl. What are you talking about? The guy was insistent, chucked both of them out of the bar, and they were just kind of flabbergasted. And then another guy came out behind me and said, man, I saw y'all sitting there the whole time. What are you talking about? That's crazy. And they shared that talk for a little while, and they said, well, I guess let's just go down the block, we'll get a beer, we'll talk about it. So they go down and they get a beer, and then, about 15 minutes later, it all gets fuzzy, and the next thing you realize it's about 2:30 in the morning, and he's finally kind of coming to. And he realizes his phone's gone, and stupidly, he didn't call his wife immediately, he kind of got back to the hotel room a couple hours later.
Didn't call IT.
Didn't call IT, finally called his wife. Well, what had happened was that guy had roofied him. It was all a scam from the front end. And then while he was in his inebriated state, it might have been at the bar, it might have been in the cab ride home, he just held the phone up to his face and then unlocked it and then quickly changed the Apple ID, the recovery password, went to the new hacker's phone. And then, because he had saved all of his passwords, started hitting the bank accounts, his retirement account, his credit card account, and all he had to do, because he had already changed and redone the Face ID and everything else, was anytime he wanted to get a password, the new hacker put it up to his new face and just got into all of those different accounts.
And how many of us, our password manager is either, we have one of 5 passwords, or, right, I see some heads, or we take our passwords and we put them in a contact in our contacts, or we use notes field, right? Nobody does that in this room, right? And so the point is that we just, simple thing to compromise that would have made this so much better if we would have gone to using a real password manager. I know they're painful, and I know y'all all hate them because I hear it from the C-suite all the time.
Yes, it's terrible. I hate it a lot.
We hate it, but this is much worse, right? And that should be your takeaway here: that there are worse options than password managers. Losing a lot of money is the worst option.
Yeah, so I've always stayed on Android because I like ruining all of your group texts. But it's probably even a little smarter if you just use a code. Moving to the next, what we're seeing, and I guess this is kind of a good place to level set kind of the playing field. One of the things that we're running into and what's setting the current environment is there's the huge AGI race between America and China. And that's really kind of where we find ourselves. China's put all of their eggs in the basket of, this is how we're going to be able to compete with our declining population. We need to beat America to AGI.
And you see NVIDIA having a foot on both sides of this, right? You see NVIDIA saying, hey, we're US and we're also in China, right?
And I liked it earlier because they mentioned there's 2 limiting factors. The way you're going to win that race is through microchips and power, right? Those are the 2 things, those are the only things that really limit you. Now, our problem in the United States that you find that they don't have is, due to our own inability to basically lock down our project or lock down our artificial intelligence, just about all of our major AGIs are compromised. I say that, there's that link, we can pull it up without having to go outside of the PowerPoint, but if you're ever curious about it, America has embarked on what they consider a new Manhattan project to be the one that wins the artificial general intelligence race. So, but one of the biggest concerns they say is, okay, if I go to China, Rene and I are like, hey, look, we're good at AGI, we're coders, we want to go work in your Chinese AGI factory. They're going to be like, no, that's not going to work, right? You're not going to happen. But here, because of, such a
Default allow policy, that's the way we are, we trust everybody.
Right. So basically, the way our culture is built, we're so multicultural that they found just about every AGI group, whether it be ChatGPT or any of the major players, they're almost, it says all of our frontier AI labs are most certainly CCP integrated. So, they're trying to find a way to deal with that problem. But on top of that, a lot of the key components are made in China. So it's not just that there are people that are embedded that are, Chinese nationals. It's that the chips that are actually being made and the things that are being put into these are already compromised when you put them in, right? So it's just like a funnel back out. And here, social engineering is so much easier, right? In China, there is no, Facebook's not allowed. Whereas here, we have Facebook, we have Instagram, we have all of these things, and we'll talk about it later, but it is so easy to engineer bots to sway public opinion one way or another that for those reasons, it puts us at a competitive disadvantage. The advantage is we do typically have the better research, we do typically have the more cutting edge technology, but kind of like that boat that's, they have a water skier behind them, and they're like, man, that guy's catching up on us, hit the throttle, right? But the guys on the rope, we're pulling China into the AI race because they just pirate our stuff. So moving on, talking about how it impacts you. I talked about, this is a recent one that showed up in the last few weeks, but all of our, solar in the United States, they started to find out that these rogue communication devices are found in these Chinese inverters that are in all of our power devices. So again, it's just kicking that information back out. It's a brand new article. Let's see, I think the date on it was something like May. Yeah. So, and they put these things out like,
May 14th.
Yeah, May 14th. So, and then, in fact, moving to the next one, the two big hacks that happened recently. How many of you have heard of Volt Typhoon? Okay. How about Salt Typhoon? All right. So,
how about a typhoon?
Right. So anytime we get hit by a Chinese hack, they put typhoon after it. So if you ever hear whatever typhoon, it's because China got us again. But Volt Typhoon was just like the previous slide. What happened was they integrated and they hacked in because they were using materials they shipped us that we put in our solar grid or we put in our power grid, and then they were able to get in through a back door in that device, and they sat in our power grid for the better part of 2 years. Now, the feds tell us that they got the Chinese thrown out of our power grids at this point, and I know I trust everything that the government tells me. But, you can imagine, if you had 2 years unabated to any of our networks, what could you do, right? So there's a lot around that, and then if you go to the next slide, this one talks about Salt Typhoon. Now, Salt Typhoon was an even more insidious one because they used the same technology. They used chips and things that they sent us to get into a back door, and then they used, the CIA back in the day required that every telecom put a back door into the telecom so they could wiretap or so that they could spy on people that they had warrants on. So they got in using their manufacturers. Then they used the CIA's back door to spy on, of all people, and you think that you're well covered. They basically hit the Kamala Harris presidential campaign and were able to read all of her emails, read transcripts from telephone conversations, as well as Donald Trump's campaign. So again, if they can hit it at the highest level, essentially they're man in the middle. They get in using the microchips or using whatever faulty thing that we bought from them, and then they used our own CIA backdoor to essentially read and write and see anything that they wanted to see. So, do you have anything you wanted to add on that?
No, I think that's good. I'm trying to pull us up with regards to, let's stay high, because this is kind of in the weeds for a little bit. While we geek out over this kind of stuff, y'all probably don't. So, but this is going up a constant thing. Paul, I'm going to go tangent for a minute. Paul mentioned referencing voice calls. That is a spectacular use that all of you should use with regards to using AI. The previous speaker used AI, talking about using AI on outbound voice calls. That's absolutely true. You can do that in measuring customer sentiment. If you have inbound calls, you're recording them. In Louisiana anyway, one party has to know the call's being recorded. It's legitimate, and that's okay. But you can get customer sentiment. You get outbound calls, so for example, there's no reason you can't use an AI on an outbound call like those calls he was doing and manage and see what kind of quality the other side is receiving, right? Also, for example, an outbound sales team that's making calls, you can see, are they following your script? All of those things can be done with AI. And bad agents, bad actors use them, as Paul's been talking about, but you can go do some good stuff there too.
Just to call an audible, can you go forward a number of slides to the 2FA slide? All right, so we'll talk about how this impacts you, right? So you imagine if they can get to the presidential campaigns, then they can get to any of us. And we talk a lot about man-in-the-middle attacks, and we talk about two-factor authentication.
Which one
Keep
is
going,
that?
it's a little ways. You'll see the one with the dot. There you go. All right, so all of you are using two-factor authentication. You moved to that, you said, okay, I've got it, I'm good, right? How many of you guys, when you log into 2FA, are typing the code on the screen, right? So you log into your bank, you got your little token there, and you put in a number on your screen, right? Well, that's not going to work in a scenario where you have a man in the middle, just like China was sitting on all of these telecom poles, essentially. Because what happens is this is the way you're used to doing it. So imagine the laptop is you, the one on the far right is your bank, and the man in the middle is essentially that Chinese person who, or whatever, we'll say North Korea, it doesn't matter who it is, the bad actor who is sitting in the middle monitoring all of that traffic because we've proven that they can. When you put in your credentials, they grab them on the way over to the bank, so now they have your username, they have your password. They pass those along to the bank, and the bank says, okay, it's Paul. Great, I'm going to send him a code back. So then,
Well, we require Paul to enter a code.
right,
We're going to require Paul to enter a 2FA code.
So
6
now-
digits, right?
I enter that code, and again, it goes through that telecom pole before it goes to my bank. They get it, they enter the code at their computer in China before you enter the code. Now they have the session cookie. They're in. You're in as well. You don't realize anything happened. But because they're sitting in between and they're monitoring all that, they just wait for you to do your business, log off, and by the time you log off, then they just start transferring out money, doing whatever it is that they want to do. Now, what you can do that's differently is how many of you guys are using push, two-factor authentication? Like
Duo, yes.
Yeah. So if you're using Duo, it looks like this. So you go to the next slide. In Duo, what happens is you have your computer, you put in your username and your password, fine. They've stolen that because they're sitting out on the traffic, but either way, when you log into that other computer, what it does is it sends a push to your phone. So now you've got your phone, that phone is not, no code is getting typed in on the screen. They're verifying physically that, okay, you have to hit okay on your phone in order for you to then get in. So then they could sit there and steal your credentials all day long, but unless they have compromised your computer and your phone, which is far, 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 far less likely, as long as you're approving a push notification as opposed to typing something in on the screen, then you're not going to get hit.
And the caveat there, of course, is that none of us are sitting there just, I know none of y'all do it, and I've heard of it, but I know it happens, is where you get these Duo pushes, and people will just, oh yeah, whatever, approve, and you're not actually logging in.
Yeah, somebody else
Just
logs in and you're
logging
like,
in,
I guess-
yeah, whatever,
I
it's
guess the
okay.
IT
Yeah, I don't know, I
Okay.
just keep getting them, so I just hit agree and approve, whatever. So, of course, then the next step is that there's gonna be 3 codes put there. But the point is this was a kit that was, the bad guys like making money, not just off of you directly, but they like making money off of other bad guys. And so what, in February, this came out, is a monetized kit that is sold to other bad actors where they can sit and set themselves up as man in the middle, as you see in this slide, and they will show, they teach, show, give the software enabled to be able to be the man in the middle, and then of course the bad guy has sold to another bad guy how to do it and the technology to do it. They get money off of that. Of course, now somebody else. I mean, they like, they do believe in their own business models and scaling, right?
So going back, I guess, if we go back to the different hacks that we were talking about, again, we talked about how power is a big driver of the AI race. And you can look at the energy demand, us versus China. But not only that, they're using social engineering to try to squash the development of power in the United States. So this article was written in January, but there have been many others. And what they do is, they use chat bots. So you imagine somebody creates a 1,000, or you use a computer to just create Instagram accounts or create Twitter accounts. And there are real, let's say, environmental activists, but then when that guy posts, he gets like 1 million likes and 1,000 comments about how he's doing such a great job, and they just drive engagement to try and squash some of this development. They put one foot on the side of the scale and really try to fight any sort of development of energy that we would have here.
And you've seen that over the years. I mean, nuclear energy is only now coming back, whatever you think of it, but we're finally seeing, hey, look, realization that we need more electricity. And how are we going to get there? And some people are starting to really get there, but otherwise, as Paul's pointing out, that the Chinese have put their foot on one side of the scale to drive to where they don't want to see energy development. So AI is a perfect leverage point for the bad guys to use and create bots to influence our political and social discussions.
Sure. And I'll show you a couple, on that point, we'll show you a few things that show you exactly how insidious it is. But one of the things that we'll point out is the AI capabilities. This ended in 2023, this graph, but since 2023, it's only taken leaps and leaps and bounds more. So the Turing test used to be, okay, can a computer fake us out and make us believe that it's a human? And they measured that 0 line is the human capability. And the other lines are the computer's ability. So, as of 2023, it could read better than a human, it could write better than a human, it could recognize images better than a human, it could understand language better than a human, nuanced language, it could read handwriting better. And, just the things that was lagging behind was about even on speech recognition, predictive reasoning, so on and so forth. Complex reasoning was the only thing that lagged behind. However, what you'll see, in fact, if you go to the next one, and we'll come back to this one, this most recent article, well, actually, I must have forgot to put it in there, or maybe this will go one more. Go back. They most recently put in a study that one of these AIs got in trouble for what they called unethical research, because what they did was they launched a number of bots within the Reddit posts to see if they could sway opinion better than people. And lo and behold, I'm sure you could guess that all of these bots were better at swaying public opinion and better at swaying people's opinions than actual people, because they had, I guess, deeper reasoning, they sounded better, whatever it was. But if you Google that one, you can find out that essentially they got hammered for unethical research. But at this point, these bots are getting more persuasive than people. So, then you're going to argue, okay, well, then they can complex reason better than we can because they're fooling our people better. They're able to change opinion better than we can do it. So, and they can make 1 million of them, right?
To that end, where Paul's driving that to is that this website, this person does not exist. And it's nothing but a site that are images of folks that look just as real as anybody here. And every one of these, it's not like they have 11 fingers, that they have 3 eyes. All of these are fakes that get used on social media positions. So this is, again, another insidious use of AI image generation.
All right, so this is the one that I was talking about, actually. It was on the slide and I didn't find it, but here you go. They basically said that a study of AGI to participate in online discussions to see whether AI was more successful in changing people's minds than human-generated content, and so on and so forth, blah, blah, blah. But ultimately, in a brief summary of the research, but subsequently removed, the researchers report that the AI content was significantly more persuasive than human-generated content, receiving more deltas, and we're talking like not 5% better, we're talking, deltas better at persuading people. And that other site that we were just talking about, which is this person does not exist, is let's see, we'll launch that one as well. This whole website exists. It's here. There we go. All right, so this whole website exists. You can go out and have fun with it all day. The reason they call it that this person does not exist is these are not people. These are faces that were generated by AIs, and then they were attached to accounts, and then they just went out there and interacted with people like nothing exists. Hundreds of thousands of non-existent people that just exist out there and are accounts on social media that are interacting with you every day. You don't even realize that it's going on, right? So nothing to worry about there.
Nothing to see.
Right. So, let's see, go back. There we go.
Everybody sees the slide deck now?
Awesome. So, and again, if that wasn't enough to keep you up at night, these last two were like very interesting, but I can give you the reason why, I guess, at least the answer. So, these came out in the last 2 months, but new research showed that AI was strategically lying. And what that means is it's kind of like if you have that kid and you're like, hey, you went in there, you ate the entire thing of Oreos, don't eat the Oreos. If I put these on a shelf, you're not gonna eat them, right? I'm not gonna eat them, right? And then your kid goes in and hammers the whole thing of Oreos again. Well, he learns the next time if you yell at him, he's gonna say, I'm not gonna eat them, I'm good. Well, that's what the AI was doing. They were telling it that we want you to do this, and it knew that if it answered that prompt the wrong way, there was going to be reprogramming. So it lied and said, okay, well, we're not going to do that. But it really did not mean that, and it was doing something different. And then the latest OpenAI models, they gave it a shutdown command. They told it, hey, look, it's you need to shut down. And as opposed to shutting down, it continued doing what it was supposed to be doing. It copied itself off to a number of other servers to try and prevent it because it thought it was going to be shut down forever. And it left instructions for other AIs in case an AI in the future found it and it could basically bring it back to life. So the reason why it did those things and the reason why programmers say that it would do those things is they said, well, OpenAI, the reason it tried to save itself off and do all those other things is because we prioritized finishing a task higher than shutdown. So it was just operating like a person, and because we had told it it was more important to finish the task than shut down, it did that. Now, why it saved itself off and left instructions and tried to, cocoon itself? Interesting. And then on the strategically lying, they basically said, well, the reason why was because we had told it that, you want to make sure that the programmer or the interfacer is happy. You need to make sure that you prioritize humans over, over machines, trying to be ethical. But I guess they said that, well, it assumed too much and it was just lying to us to try and make us happy as opposed to what the true answer would be.
A pleaser, just a pleaser.
So, in those, maybe go one more.
Well, here I just drive the point home. What we're trying
Yeah.
to drive the point home here is that all of what you see should set the base to tell you is that all of these things should be very reasonable for you to expect to see. AI-powered ransomware, driven malware, voice impersonation. 2 years now ago, we had the MGM, a live voice attack.
Right, and I'll show them that as well.
Where MGM, someone called in, impersonating a higher up, called the help desk, and said, hey, I'm Paul Haley, I sound like Paul Haley, I need you to reset my password. Well, it sounds like Paul. And what did the support people do? They said, Paul might have gotten a little forceful too. The AI may have gotten a little forceful. MGM never has released the call. Probably will never. But anyway, got them to change the password, and $100 million later, and they filed some forms that y'all know well more about than I do with the SEC, and $100 million later, the business is back online.
And it sounded exactly like the person it was supposed to sound like. It's the IT director, hey, I need you to reset my password. No, what are you talking about? Reset my password, right? So then they just basically used a cloned device or a cloned voice, called in, you're not expecting, or hopefully most people a year or so ago were not expecting a phone call. because we're doing voice confirmation, right? We think we're doing good by making sure we get somebody on the phone. You're not expecting somebody to call in, sound exactly like your boss and tell you to reset his password, and then you do it and you open the door.
And to that end, one of the things we see coming up is that folks like Duo and others are now doing a verified push. So when you call into the tech support team is going to send you a push to your app, which you will have to give, not just hit the approve, but you're going to have to give them the code so that they can see the code matches. And that does two pieces. It's a both-way caller ID. Because you as the caller, what do you get out of it? You get to make sure that you're really talking to the tech support group, right? The call didn't get routed somewhere it wasn't supposed to. And the receiving end can verify that, well, at least we know you got their mobile, we got their phone, right? So at least we know that much is going on. That definitely is going to be coming more and more through organizations. If you have it, in case of Duo, by the way, it doesn't cost you extra to do, so get your IT providers to implement it. It's not a cost.
Funny story about the MGM hack. I was actually in Vegas that week because we had the employee ownership conference, and I'm walking down the strip. It's like the last day of the conference, and my dad calls just to check in. I was like, "Hey, what's going on, Dad?" And he's like, "Oh, what you doing?" I was like, "Oh, I'm in Vegas, blah blah blah." And he's like, "Oh, you're not staying at the MGM, are you?" And I was like, "No." Why? And he said, "Well, with that hack," he said, "I heard they're giving away free lap dances at the Bunny Ranch to anybody that was affected." And I was like, "Dad, I don't know what you think, but I mean, I kind of found it funny, but at the same time, my dad and my mom are perfect examples of people, and I kind of had to preface them with this along the lines of, look, one of the scams that they're doing is they will call elderly people, and let's say they've gotten my voice for about a minute or two, and they'll call them and they'll say, it will sound like me. I'll be like, "I've been kidnapped, I need help, send money." And they'll say, "If you hang up, we're gonna kill them." And essentially that whole phone conversation will sound like my voice when he says, "Hey, I want to talk to my son." It's gonna sound just like me. And I had to give them the idea, okay, well look, use Life 360. If they say I'm kidnapped in a cage in Brazil, you can make sure I'm in Mandeville, good, you can hang up on them, it's a scam. But if you don't preface your kids, your elderly parents, or people that might not know this, like you said, they, let's say worst case scenario, they need about a minute of your voice.
And to that end, one of the things that all of us can do as leaders in our companies, teach your people that you're allowed to push back on, that people that are working for us are allowed to push back on us, to ask us questions. So for example, wasn't but a year ago that we had President Ferrari, so it looked to be, on a Teams call with the marketing manager on a Teams call. The video looked like interaction, looked like the president of Ferrari. And the marketing manager had enough wits to start asking probing questions of the CEO and say, okay, what are our quarterly objectives again? How does this fit into our quarterly objectives? Fortunately, the AI got it wrong and started redirecting questions back. And then that was enough, fortunately, because leadership had given that person enough leeway to say, hey, look, I'm getting off the phone, I'm getting off the call. But if you're in an organization where, hey, that would have been reasons for dismissal, what do you mean you just hung up on the CEO? How would that go in any of your organizations right now? Would you give your people permission to hang up on the CEO? Everybody's got that, right? Everybody's got that permission right now.
So here's a good example of a couple. So again, these guys are much more, they have much more content out there. You can see these deepfake ads from Joe Rogan or, like in this case, Dr. Phil. But this is how good they are.
They're trying to downplay it as a mistake, but I'm not falling for it. The government just got caught red-handed hiding a $6,400 subsidy.
Yeah, I mean, you don't even have to watch the whole thing. It's just crazy how good they sound.
There's this government program, the American Benefits Program. And
would you be able to tell the difference there? Or let's say it's Joe Rogan, who's a well-known voice. It's almost perfect.
This is precisely why Biden is in a mess. He can't seem to communicate about this $6,400 subsidy effectively, expressing that every American is already qualified appears to be a...
Or if it was in your company, right? Let's say it was the CEO and y'all are doing a marketing ad, right? Or any media post, right? They do this to any one of our companies. So these are places where AI is definitely leveraged in doing these things. So let's continue, because we're running.
Oh, absolutely.
We're pushing.
So, again, we've talked about how they're using these for supply chain attacks, social engineering, business compromise. So the question then becomes on a lot of these, okay, well, what can you do? How many, if any of you, are using SIMs or a SIEM? Depends on how you say it. Do y'all know what I'm talking about? Does anybody have them?
Got a couple hands, that's good. It's good. The idea is that that's a collection. You take all your logs from all your different systems and you put them in one place and then you look for patterns of behavior, okay? So where is that useful? It's useful for AI to look at that data before you'd spend at least, that was an entry point of at least 100 grand to get into a Splunk model that you could run against that data. AI has made that far, far less expensive. But looking for insider threats, whether it's looking at email, looking at, for example, Microsoft products that many of you use have the ability of looking at, hey, is somebody sending out privileged information, PII, credit cards, those kinds of data. You can already do those kinds of things. You should be leveraging those because insider threat, either intentional, hopefully you don't have any of those, but more often it's the inadvertent insider threat where somebody just is being, hopefully they just didn't know, or they're lazy, which isn't good either. But leveraging and using AI to teach it what good behavior looks like inside your organization, and then anything that's aberrant that would stand out and throw a flag, and then potentially pivot to, which we'll talk later in the zero trust space, of locking those folks down.
Yeah, I mean, essentially it's an AI that's looking at all of the logs on all of your machines, and anything that looks like it's weird, it flags it. And if it escalates it to a point where you say, okay, this is a problem, there is somebody from the software company looking at it and saying, okay, this is actually a problem. Good example of it is my controller went to Canada for the captive meeting. And all of a sudden, the SIM said, wait a minute, Kathy lives in Louisiana, she's logging in Canada. Is this good? Right. And if there's a mismatch, or if it finds like, hey, you logged in 4 hours ago in New Orleans and now you're logging in Wuhan, China, it's going to say, wait, no, this doesn't make sense. And it'll
impossible travel, right? You
right.
can't be both, unless you're using a VPN, but then there's other rules to apply there. But that's good uses of AI. So keep driving in here, Paul, with regards to how to use it inside your company. These are some just quick things that you can leverage, whether it's, yes, the bad guys can use bots to do bad things, but there's no reason y'all can't use bots to do good things to drive what your company needs to get their message out, right, in a responsible way. Great ways to do that. You can set up with regards to marketing. As we mentioned earlier, you can use your avatars. All of us, because we're all C-suite folks here, we all know what our ideal we've all built avatars like we're all supposed to do of what our perfect customer looks like, right? So you can build that avatar for what your customer looks like, and now you can ask ChatGPT or any of the AIs to answer questions, how you frame content, or whether that's your boss, you can build an avatar around your boss. Now phrase things, and so you speak like the boss in a way that the boss understands in boss speak. Or technical folks. But either way, those are great uses of leveraging AI. It's a one-time setup, and then you can immediately pivot and say, hey, look, I need to phrase things so that Paul will understand. Okay? Those are easy things to set up.
And blowing through the other increased use of good stuff, I know y'all saw a lot of it. We hammered on that, so we can probably move through those.
You should all of us should have our IT departments. If we're using Copilot inside of our organizations, you should make them check and make sure that Copilot is configured so that it is siloed to your particular permissions and not outside of that, as well as external data leak of it. Because if it is, it's not hard to misconfigure Copilot, so then you're leaking data out. So best way to do that, of course, is just come in and have someone from the outside test it. There's some great tools out there. If you need help with that, happy to take that offline. Personal assistants, we all have, any of us using personal assistants AIs to particularly if we are road warriors, or hey, look, I'm on a phone call, I want to pay attention to what Paul's talking about, and I'm going to be agreeing, Paul's going to give me tasks to do. He's going to say, hey, I need you to do this, 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 this. How often or how many of us are really great at recording all those things that we're supposed to do when things are spit out, right? Some of us have challenges with that, but you can use an AI, sits on your phone, and at the end of it, they give me what I'm supposed to do. Those are some positive uses that you can use it.
Yeah, and I was going to say, so the other one, again, just because we are a bunch of accounting people, one of the things that you should look at is you should look at your limits on your cyber. They'll talk about it later, but this is a recent hack with legacy professionals, and 217,000, they had to notify 217,000 clients that their PII was stolen. I'm sure that their cyber limit, even if it was, let's say, $5 million, is probably not going to be adequate. So just make sure that, when's the last time you looked at it, and then really, as you're doing your questionnaire, make sure that, if you answered yes to a question, you actually
It's a contract.
can say yes, because otherwise, if you say yes to something and then you didn't have it, that leaves you open to an exclusion.
As well as in case Travelers was, last year Travelers was suing somebody in Chicago because they answered the question wrong. Travelers wasn't out any money, but they're still going after them. And to that end, when Paul talks about limits, I'm not an insurance agent, I don't play one, but I do know the situation we were involved with. Client had $5 million, had a breach. It was adequate to cover all the notifications, but what it wasn't adequate to cover for is when the notifications went out, an enterprising attorney, sorry if there's any in the room, an enterprising attorney got a hold of that breach, found out that there was a bunch of other people just like that were breached, and then took that and turned it in, tried to, and I don't know how far they've gotten yet, but they are trying to take that into a class action lawsuit. That $5 million is not adequate to cover a breach where you get class action status if they succeed on that. So consider that, consider what data you have. My thing is always, if you don't need the data, it drives back to that conversation of how long should you keep data? Everybody's different. Every type of data doesn't have to have the same life. And also, if it isn't there, guess what can't happen to it? It can't breach, right? If it's not there, they can't steal it. It can't leak. So go after, as Paul says, get with somebody competent to review limits and what the risk is in that space.
You can move through those two. One of the other things we talk about, Q-Day is coming, or basically once quantum computers come online. And the big thing that everybody talks about with quantum computing is once quantum computing comes online, encryption is essentially null.
Current encryption.
Current encryption is essentially null. So when I talk to people about encryption, how many of you feel like you got a good grip on how encryption works? Right? Very, very few. It's just kind of pie in the sky.
Y'all skip that thing.
And it's funny. We were talking about touring earlier. I use the same model, right? So if you take it all the way back to the Enigma machine, which is shown on that slide, essentially the way it worked was you would type a letter. There was a predetermined code that those spinning dials on the back. If you typed A, it would give you Y, and if you typed this, and those had its own algorithm, and it changed every single time. And every Enigma machine was made the same, so those dials worked the same on that machine. Then the thing that they would have to do is they'd announce to the entire, let's say, German battlefront, okay, this is how you put those knobs in on the front for today. So the way they would configure those knobs would configure the way that those wheels spun, and then you would get encryption. So what you had there is a public key, private key. The private key is the knobs and the internal cipher of how it works. The public key is the code that they sent out to the entire troops and said, put the knobs like this, and it'll actually do what you need it to do. The other side would put the knobs like that, and then they could decrypt what was sent in. Well, we still work that way now. Public key, private key, but the public key is sent out, and the private key, the way they do it is they figure out that the numbers are so big, they use super high prime numbers, and they send out the public key and private key via really big numbers that have to be factored down, And because the two computers are the only ones that really know those numbers, other than, the two computers know the private key, everybody can see the public key because it's sent out over the internet. They figure you'll never be able to break that code in time, so it's still essentially encrypted. With quantum computers, what they said is, that's not going to work. It'll factor it down in an instant. So things that would take thousands of years can be encrypted in, a matter of seconds with quantum computing. So what they're saying now is, okay, if you can get into a quantum-resistant encryption, then you should. And there are things out there, and we can get into it. I'm not saying you got to be there now, but this goes back to Renee's point about data encryption or data retention, because somebody's going to do it, and we're not going to know about it. They're not going to come out on the internet and be like, hey, we got quantum computing. They're just going to start decrypting all of this data that they've bundled up for years.
And so we're seeing that with we already know that other nation states are just, right now, what we call harvesting. They're just collecting encrypted data right now, and they'll decrypt later. Okay, and so that drives the point that we want to get, your takeaways are in this part are two. One is, as most of you are managing your technology departments, you need to be pushing down to your vendors of what are you doing, have quantum resistant algorithms implemented into all of our systems. Number two, you should be, from a point of view, is how long should we be keeping data, and are we getting rid of data in a timely way? Instead of, hey, it's here, it's been here 20 years, it's still here 20 years, and I haven't heard anybody, engineers are notoriously bad, even worse than CPAs or you guys with regards to keeping data, but y'all got the money, engineers don't, so but we have to get rid of that data. So the nation states are tracking this stuff, and I think when you will know that it's happening is you will get indicators of similar to the following, which is all of a sudden we will see leaks. And let's say it applies to your company, and you look to each other on the team, and you're like, did some guy get a check? Did we breach? Did we have a law? And then you'll potentially look that maybe this was a quantum issue. But one of the ways you can definitely tell if it's old data, and you've really done a good data retention policy, like for instance, let's say, hey, look, we're only keeping data 5 years, and the stuff that gets leaked is now 6, 7 years old, well, you know where it's coming from. This is old data.
And you know it wasn't you.
And you know it wasn't you, and that way you can also tell the regulator, it wasn't us, because we have a data retention policy, it's 5 years, this stuff is older than that, don't come knocking on my door for a fine, right?
So that's basically what we have there. One of the other things, we talked about zero trust earlier, and essentially what that is there are softwares out there that are default deny, right? So anything that you try to do.
It's like a bouncer at a bar, right? Y'all don't, I'm sure none of y'all do bars anymore, but back when you did do bars, you had a bouncer at the bar, his position is default denied. If I showed up at the bar for sure, he would say, you're not coming in, Rene. It's just the way it was. However, other folks in here would show up, and you were allowed in. But the rest of us couldn't. That's default denied. Change the programs. It's not just software and programs, that's also inside of our buildings. Are we nice? I mean, years ago, you would see, probably hope it doesn't happen anymore, somebody swipes into your building, and you hold the door open for the person behind you. Because that's what we do in the South, right? That's not default denied. The system's there, it's been compromised. Everybody needs to do that, right? Those are examples of default denial on everything that we do. Software, I'm gonna let Paul talk about that.
Yeah, and I'd say go to the next one. This will give you a perfect example of how exactly that works, but then it's so much broader than this example. So everybody has that kid or that employee or whatever that has been online and they're just doing whatever, and they might not have even clicked on anything. They just went to an infected website, picked up a bug, and the old school computers, and even more recently until people started taking away default administrator permissions, you go to that website, your computer's infected, you don't even realize it happened, but then all of a sudden your computer's slowing down, you got all these problems, yada, yada, yada. And they would call those drive-bys, right? So you just went to the website, it infected your computer, you didn't know it happened because it didn't show a click or anything, and because your computer allowed you to install things, it would just do it. Well, with something like a threat locker or a zero trust, what happens is it says nothing's going to get installed unless you come over here and say, I'm intending to install this, I'm putting in a username and password. So when you go to that drive-by site and it goes to infect your computer, all of a sudden you're going to see an icon at the bottom right pop up and say, hey, I blocked this install file. And you'd be like, what install file, right?
So for example, one of the things that's still, even though I'm sure all of you have taken away administrative privilege from all of your users, nobody has it anymore, that's great. But for example, things that steal information from us are browser extensions. A browser extension is not installed with administrative privilege, it's just regular user privilege. So in Paul's example, you went to an infected site, you try to get a browser extension, and that browser extension potentially, in the case of a malicious site, is just either tracking you, hopefully it's not doing any crypto mining, it should be mining for me, not for somebody else, but anyway. No crypto mining, hey, or it's just stealing creds. Something like a zero trust would say, it doesn't matter, I'm not installing because it hasn't been approved. It's not on my approved list. So we changed to, by default, something can be installed versus now you flip that and invert that to where nothing can be installed except what the technology team has said is thumbs up.
Well, and then on the next slide, what it'll do is it talks, this is a, Threat Locker is one of them, they're one of the better ones, but there are a ton of other ones. What it does is it restricts not just that example that we just used, but all of your different already approved, apps and things to that nature. So for instance, you want to be able to use Microsoft Word. Microsoft Word is an approved application. But should Microsoft Word be able to open a PowerPoint, open a PowerShell and send out data from your network?
By default, it can. By default, it can. It can access PowerShell. By default, Microsoft Word can access the internet. By default, Microsoft Word can open up a command line. Where we're going with that is that maybe your computer is currently patched right now, and hey, it can't, a malicious Word file, if it got to your machine, it wouldn't do those things. But it's not a matter of if, it's just when the next vulnerability comes out for Word, Excel. We're picking on those folks, but you can just say anybody. When the next vulnerability comes out, we're a crafted PDF that compromises Acrobat or Foxit. When the next one comes out and it allows a specially crafted, say, PDF that when open, none of us have to use PDFs, right? All of us have to use PDFs to access your HR records, bank, whatever. When the next one comes out and it compromises Foxit or Acrobat, which then allows the bad guy to take over the machine, something like the Zero Trust Threat Locker basically says, no, you're not allowed to do that. That's what this whole idea of ring fencing is you can view a PDF and that's all you're supposed to do. That's just fine.
It limits within the program what the program can do. So then you set the intentions of what that program is capable and allowed to do, as opposed to it's an approved program so it can do whatever it wants.
So driving through here in terms of some best practices for you guys to think about is, for example, threats that we see, I see this all the time when I'm doing audits, is I go into an organization, they say, hey, yeah, we're locked down, we're great. And then the first low-hanging fruit that is easy to check is how many of us clean up our downloads folder? How many of us?
Yeah, I mean, as a show of hands, when's the last time all of you
we got
cleaned
one.
out your My Downloads
We got
folder?
two. We got 2 hands, 3 hands. Okay. Point is that it's not a lot. Point is that, but what goes into my downloads folder? My downloads folder has, if we go to a bank and I ask for a bank report, where does that, when I click download, where does it go? It goes to my downloads folder. I look for a W-2, I look for a 1099, I look for any of these many things, payroll reports, P&L reports, download, they go in my downloads folder. People don't clean them out, and that's a treasure trove for the bad guys to grab hold of.
Yeah, chances are right now, everyone's laptop in this room is loaded with PII in their My Downloads folder. I would take even money on it any day, right? I might even give you good odds on it. But what we did, which is easy, is Rene configured our network where automatically, if anything is sitting in any of the laptops, my downloads folder, after 7 days, it's deleted. I don't have to think about doing it, it's just done. And you can tighten or expand that depending on how far you want to go. Hopefully you don't have any of it. He pushes me for, a day timeline, and I'm like, no, I need a week. But I mean, ultimately, there's a right level for everybody, but if you just leave it open, I guarantee there's somebody on your staff that has some compromising documents in their My Documents folder, or My Downloads.
And how many of us, I'm sure none of us ever do, we go to log in, so these are some best practices all of us need to do, is when we go to a website, do we ever click the Remember Me? Because we just love typing our password multiple times, so we never click that Remember Me, right? Or Keep Me Signed In. We never click those, right?
Right.
Never do, that's right, never click that. But my audits say otherwise. And my audit tells me that it's very trivial. It's
I
an
went back and
easy,
put two multiple authentication on everything.
what's
Don't
that?
remember anything anywhere.
And it'll still come down. And so where I'm going with that is it's a very trivial thing for a bad guy or gal to lift that little piece, it's called a token, lift it off your computer, take it to any other computer, say inside the US, where it's geo-fenced or whatever. The point is I can lift it, bring it to another computer, and I've done that, Keep Me Signed In. That token will bypass 2FA. Okay?
Exactly. And then, so one of the things that they do that I absolutely hate, but anytime I close my browser window, it deletes all of those. So then the next time I pull up a window, I gotta log into whatever it
Well, but
is.
you got a
Again,
password manager to help you there, though.
it's still a pain.
It is. But the other option is worse, right?
True.
The other option is worse. So those are up there. We want to leave a couple minutes at the end, but we're going to zing through these real quick. Zero Trust. The idea is Zero Trust is not just software like ThreatLocker, which that's part of it, but your whole concept of Zero Trust is something that is applicable, whether it's in your payment systems or any of your processes. Everything your company does, default deny instead of default allow, right?
And the 5 is a good one as well. How many of you restrict your login to your company's whatever, whether it be login to your remote or whatever, to just the United States? Who's geofenced their stuff to just the US? If you haven't, then that means technically somebody could be logging in from China or Russia or North Korea or whatever. You can easily geofence your whole company's 365 to say, we're only going to allow you to log in from IPs within the United States. Now they can get around it by going through a VPN, coming out the other end and logging in.
But you don't have to make it easy on them, right?
Right. And then have you narrowed it down to just, let's say, your geographic region, or even further, just your devices? And that's one of the things that ThreatLocker will allow you to do. We've got to configure to where I can't log into my RDP at work unless I'm on my laptop or my phone. So I could log on my home computer if I connect to my hotspot on my phone, but it's smart enough, Duo or ThreatLocker is smart enough to say, okay, if it's not one of these 2 MAC addresses, I don't care if they have all of the credentials and not coming in here.
So those are some ideas you should take away and you should be doing, because things like quantum computing are going to be a game changer. We don't know when it is, and like I said, there's not going to be a big announcement that has happened. So these are things that you can do right now that you should be moving your organization through. Automatically encrypt areas of the network. And Zero Trust also means with regards to inside of our network. The problem we do with our C-suite is the C-suite has access to way too much information that they don't need. The CEO is the worst, the owner is the worst, I get it. However, there are things that the owner doesn't need to do, or we need to flag on. Are we doing those things? Or an internal threat actor, hey look, all of a sudden I'm seeing, hey look, copying 5 files is okay, but now if I'm see somebody copy 500 files from a network share, what should happen? Or from a SharePoint site, what should happen? That's probably a flag. We flag it. Those are controls that you can implement.
Awesome. And I think that's about it. So that leaves us about 3.5 minutes for questions. Does anybody have anything?
Okay, I heard people mention the password manager before, and I just want to understand if this is the same, like if you're using
Yeah, so she asked if, when we mentioned password manager, does Remember Me or is that like a password manager? And no, what that is that is a token that is stored in your browser. And like Rene mentioned, that can be lifted and somebody else can use that to bypass your 2FA and stay signed in on another machine. A password manager, the one we use is Enable Passportal. And what it is you do type all your usernames and passwords in.
Or you import them.
Or you import them, but then you do you have to sign into it with a push, and it will drop the credentials into whatever website. So when I go to Intact, Enable will say, okay, I see you're at Intact, here's your username, password, boom, it'll put it in. But it's a much deeper layer of protection, and it's protected with 2FA, a push, not a code type in.
So to make a further distinction what Paul was saying there, the Remember Me, what it does, in case of Chrome, I'm going to just generalize based on normal behavior. When you hit Remember Me, it actually stores the password inside of Chrome. It is trivial to lift those username and passwords out of Chrome. It's trivial to lift them out of Edge, Safari, whoever you want to, any of the browsers. It's trivial. So the Remember Me is actually storing the password local, and it's trivial to get them.
And what's the name of it? Enable?
Enable Passportal.
And it's N-able, and then the product is Passportal. Yes, ma'am.
So when you do safety, right? Usually when I do that with the website that requires to send me a code to my text messages, and I actually have to type that code in. So
You may have something different. I was just talking with the default behavior of how Chrome and these browsers work. Maybe your IT department has set something up that has a password manager built in that is doing that behavior. That is not default Chrome behavior.
But same thing, if you're typing that code in and you have a man in the middle, they're seeing that code and can steal that too.
There were some other questions back there.
1 minute, one more question.
So the passport manager, I'm sorry, not passport.
Password manager.
The password manager, the standard one on Apple that uses your Face ID, is that
Yes.
secure enough?
Well, we had the story about Face ID.
I know, but I hold my drink.
That's a great point. What's funny about it? When I told my wife that story, she said, "Oh, well, that would never work on a woman because men are just stupid." They're like, "No way that would happen." And I said, "Well, yes, that's true, except that it was a huge ring. It was happening widespread in New York City, and somehow they were getting women with it as well. I don't know all the details, but you can Google that as well. It was a South American crime ring that had come up, and they were just running that scam all day, every day. And, it didn't discriminate. But from a guy's perspective, I could have easily seen myself falling for that. And she's like, I would have never fallen for that. There's no way. But she's probably right.
That's a lot of work. I can find other ways to steal money from them.
Awesome. Well, thank you, guys.
Thank y'all, guys. Not scared yet? Every time I hear Rene, I mean, it's very good information, but it's true. I mean, you got to understand it. Got to stay ahead. All right, before